Coming to you from wild and wonderful West Virginia, I'm your host, Jeremiah J., and this is Politically Motivated, a show that aims to provide open, respectful dialogue on the issues facing everyday Americans, and a space where we can share what specific issues of the day motivate us to get involved politically. We have a very special guest on the program today, 2024 Libertarian Presidential Candidate and Vice-Presidential Nominee, Mike Maat. Thank you, Mike. It is an honor to have you on the program.
Oh, my goodness. It's a joy for me and an honor for me. It's great to be with you and to see you today and see the setup you have here. It's a terrific experience all the way around.
Well, I appreciate it. Mike, what stands out to me about you is your diverse portfolio of experiences.
It comes with being old.
Does it?
Yeah, I think that's really what you mean is, gee, Mike, you're awfully old. But that's the nicest way to say it.
I wouldn't call you old.
I appreciate that.
But if you want to call yourself old, that's fine. You were a financial economist under the first Bush administration. You were also a college professor for a few years, adjunct. And then you were a police officer from the age 49 to 60, not to mention your political campaigns.
Yeah.
I guess the first question I would like to ask you is, what is it like working in finance to somebody that would have absolutely no idea?
If I were describing it to someone who had no idea what it was like to work in finance?
Correct.
Extremely detail-oriented in a way that certainly as a youngster I hadn't appreciated. You know, when I was studying economics and business growing up, I don't think I had realized the almost mind-numbing level of detail that you would have to master. I started out in banking. I worked for a couple of banks before going back to graduate school in economics, and then worked for financial institutions and nonprofits, and eventually the White House. I can remember, you make me remember things that are weird. I can remember literally having nightmares when I worked for the White House, not figuratively, literally having nightmares in which numbers were floating around.
Wow.
You know, kind of like an old Disney cartoon or something.
Yeah, just
right?
floating around.
Yeah. It was like that. Obviously, some metaphor to, you know, trying to gain control over figures and data and things like that. So it's a weird experience. It's not the glamour that you might think it is. Not that anyone would necessarily think that being in finance was glamorous.
Well, most people don't know their way around numbers. So I think it's interesting that you bounced from a financial career to then going and being a police officer. Did being a police officer teach you anything about the state of our nation that you didn't know prior to your service?
A lot. Part of being a police officer is interesting just because it is such a different experience. You know, working as a cop is very different than most jobs.
Yes, it is.
And I think you could probably say that about a lot of jobs, but it's really different. I had always been interested in law enforcement. I always wanted to be a cop from a very, very young age. Indeed, I initially took the entrance exam for the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police Department when I was like 28 or 29 in grad school in Washington.
Wow, so it's always been a passion
and
for
then
you.
Put it off for financial reasons. I just didn't think, you know, it paid enough. It's kind of embarrassing to admit that I made the decision based on money, at least in part. Put it off. And when you're 49, you can't put it off too much later.
No, you can't.
It's time to poop or get off the pot.
Yeah.
And it was an interesting experience because it is so different. You do learn a lot. I had gone into it thinking I would do it for 2 or 3 years.
Interesting.
Just to experience it. I fell in love with it in a way. I think some officers do. Some folks hate it, and quit relatively early. But
it's always going to be somebody that hates their job.
Well, I think most of us hate our job from time to time, right? I mean, certainly. You learn a lot about people. You learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about other cops, which I hadn't really anticipated as having been so fascinating, so interesting. You learn that people become cops truly because of a sense of service.
Yeah.
I think a lot of folks, I spent 14 years in the Libertarian Party. Libertarians are naturally skeptical of government work of any type, right, including police officers, and rationally so. Police officers do as many stupid things as any other group of people, and in some cases that turns very dangerous and very public, and
it can.
So we're aware of these things. So it's rational for people to be skeptical of police officers. But one thing that was really interesting to find is that people become cops because they want to serve their communities. You can become jaded pretty quick.
Serving your community and seeing the bureaucracy.
Seeing the bureaucracy, the frustration, feeling like you're not making a difference.
Yeah.
Gets very, very frustrating. And so I think that that's in part what leads to certain types of mistakes.
Yeah, that definitely checks out. We have seen a lot of mistakes from police in the last decade in our nation, and it has caused a lot of distrust into policing in the United States. And we'll definitely get to that a little later.
And mistakes that undoubtedly have been made for 100 years.
Yeah.
We see it more now. And ironically, I think that police officers, I don't have data to back this up, but it's my sense that police officers make fewer mistakes than 10 years ago, than 20 years ago, than 30 years ago. I do get a sense that we're going the right direction in terms of training and recruiting and understanding how to handle certain situations. But we see them more now than ever before.
Absolutely. And so you worked in the White House, and then you worked as a police officer. Mm-hmm. Did you notice a difference?
With 30 years in between.
With 30 years in between.
Well, 20 years in between, yeah.
Did you notice any difference about the everyday Americans you ran across as a police officer versus working in the White House?
You mean, did I ever arrest anyone I worked with at the White House?
You probably felt like you should.
There's no question about that, right? Yes. You as a police officer, you deal with everybody.
Yeah.
You do run into economists and attorneys, and you run into folks that are having a hard time making ends meet, and you work with homeless people, criminals.
Yeah.
Social workers, who, of course, are among the most fantastic people in the world, working for pennies to make the world a better place. And
yes.
I can only imagine how frustrated they are, right? So it's a greater cross-section, and you also see people in a greater cross-section of their own experience. In other words, for any given type of person,
I see,
however you might define that,
right,
you see a full range. You see the full panoply of things that people go through, whatever their background, whether they're black or white, or whether they're Hispanic or from Asia, and whether they're rich or poor, or whether they're frequently committing crimes or frequently a victim or infrequently coming across law enforcement. No matter what kind of person you're talking about, you see them frequently at their worst or in the worst situation of their lives. And that's hard.
That's an incredible point, because policing in the United States has to be for everyone, and every color, every creed. And I think it's important that we highlight that.
And for anyone, no matter what it is that they're going through.
Correct.
Each of us is 1,000 persons inside of us.
It's a good point.
And, when they come out, it's because of whatever we're experiencing at the moment. And generally speaking, police officers are involved with a situation because something has gone wrong.
Correct. So transitioning now, you worked in the White House, you were a police officer. Mike, what made you want to become politically motivated?
What was the motivation?
Correct.
Oh, Jeremiah, because the world's going to hell.
In a handbasket?
In a handbasket.
Okay. At least it's a handbasket.
On a train car. We do have problems. We do have challenges. I think it's worth observing that we have been going through a great ideological battle that a decade ago I would have thought we'd pretty much wrapped up an ideological battle between, on one side, I might loosely characterize as liberty-minded or libertarian, a reverence and a respect for individual liberty, all the things that we learned coming through the Enlightenment. Everything
Correct.
from free markets and Adam Smith to, the Locke and Rousseau debates and how we feel about individual responsibility and the need for limited government and respect for minorities. That's all on one side. And then on the other side, you might loosely say a group of folks who believe in a more activist government, the idea that government is in the business of defining our rights, and that a lot of folks are better off not left alone. Marxism, socialism.
Yeah.
All of that I might throw in. These are huge buckets, right? But let me throw that into the other bucket. I might argue that this is an ideological battle that is coming to a head over the next decade or two, but that I used to think, when I was in my 20s, I thought that that was pretty much resolved. Consider the United States.
Yeah.
We are a nation founded by religious refugees who eventually declared independence from the dominant superpower empire of their century and was able to weather a war. And this group of people went on, ideologically speaking, their descendants went on to write the Constitution, which
Yeah.
I would argue is the most important product, the most important invention that our species has ever conjured.
I would agree.
They were able eventually to overcome slavery and defeat Nazis and outlast the Soviets. And, you might think, gee whiz, at some point we can just declare victory. This is an ideology that lifted the entire world out of abject poverty.
It did.
What is there, you don't have to be Milton Friedman and Thomas Sowell to recognize that we were right.
The proof is in the product.
The proof is in the product. So, why is it that we have this debate, certainly worldwide, and oddly, weirdly, even in the United States to a certain extent? Why is this still going on?
Yeah.
And I find that that's both fascinating and problematic. When I was young, I thought we were done. And as I got older, I realized we're not.
We're definitely not.
We're definitely not. And it's a weird thing. And now I find that the fact that we're not done has led to a certain number of threats to our society that, I don't mean to sound overly melodramatic, but could be existential threats. Our government has borrowed so much money that at some point it's not going to be able to service the debt.
That's right.
Unless something profound changes. I don't know exactly when. I don't know if that's 5 years or 25 years. But it's not 50 years or 100 years.
We won't make it that long.
We're not going to make it that long. The fact that we continue with the interventionist foreign policy that we seem to have adopted in, the 1950s, never changed, never updated it. I mean, you could argue that we've updated it, but we update it and keep going. You know, it's
Exactly.
the
You
same
haven't
policy,
stopped.
2.0, 3.0, 4.0,
Right.
right? But there's a straight line from Eisenhower through Obama, you
I
know.
would say absolutely.
And now we seem to be inventing new threats in the sense that America is more split than ever before. Ideologically, I don't know. Certainly we're split in terms of our parties, right? We all understand, coming out of the 90s and the internet, and now we get our news from different places. We're all familiar with the litany of reasons how this all happened.
Correct.
Politicians have a huge incentive to split us.
And they use social media to do it very well.
They use social media to do it very well. That's well said. Which now leads to a threat that when I was your age, we would have considered it a joke. When people talk about the possibility of some version of a civil war is a little bit dramatic, but civil discord that goes to civil unrest and spirals out of control and threatens the ability of the government to manage civility in this country. That is something that if you brought that up even as recently as a decade ago, I think people would have said, you're insane. When I was a kid, we went through Kent State.
I remember reading on that.
Thank you. Kids at home, ask your parents. Even in the darkest of the late 60s, the darkest of the early 70s, at no point did you think the government's going to impose martial law all over the nation, and the rioting is going to react badly to that, and it's going to exponentially increase, and there's going to be more National Guards, and then eventually there's going to be military regulars, and then eventually there's going to be an armed conflict, and then there's going to be governors against the federal government. At no point did you think that that was going to happen.
No.
Right? As a matter of fact, if you described it as such, if you just said what I just said,
Sounds like a movie.
it would be a movie, and it would be a dopey movie, right?
Would be.
Nobody would think that that were possible. Now, if you describe what I just described and then said, that could never happen, that's what would get you characterized as dopey now.
Exactly. We've completely switched sides with that.
You can't argue it's impossible. You can say it's unlikely. I still hang on to the idea that that's really unlikely.
I hope so as well.
Yeah. But you can't say that that's impossible. So despite the fact, and these are remnants of this same 250-year-old debate of what role government should play.
Yes, it absolutely is.
You know, they're leftovers.
It's made its way into the modern world.
They're
postmodern
leftovers.
world.
It's made its way into the modern world. In other words, we keep inventing these threats to our society, despite the fact that we would have thought that classical liberalism had won, right?
Yeah.
If you're my age, which is to say, I'm done working, and the kids are out of college, and you see it coming, right? It's one thing if you didn't teach economics and you didn't work for political organizations, and so you don't see it coming. I'll let you off the hook. But if you see this coming, I think you have an obligation to try to do something about it.
That's incredible. So you see your political motivations as an obligation.
Well, you don't want to be the guy, nobody wants to be the guy who, 15 years from now, right? In 15 years, I'll be in my late 70s, right? You don't want to be in your late 70s and one of these things goes wrong. And you just spent the last 15 years watching, Fox and CNN and eating popcorn.
Watching the empire burn.
Right. That's you don't want that.
I respect that.
So I don't know that I have the perfect solution, but I do know I'll go down swinging, right? I'll go down looking for the solution. And I think that if we can, whether it's my team or another team that we can join up with, or if it's the Republican Party or the American government in general, if there's a group that can make a difference on the margin, I think you're obliged to try. Because at this point, the two different sides of the debate no longer seem to be, a liberal political party and a conservative political party, or Republicans and Democrats, or, anything like that. The tribalism that now defines the battle is, on one side, a bunch of crazy politicians on the left that shoot their mouth off about how stupid everyone is on the right, and a bunch of crazy politicians on the right that shoot their mouths off about how stupid everyone is on the left. A group of people who just wants to stay in power. They want to take your resources and use it as graft to keep themselves in power and to manipulate the government to do whatever it takes to keep this rolling.
Oh, they make a whole career out of it.
Make a whole career out of it. And then the other side of this battle is the rest of us. You and me and the other 330 million people that live in this country. It seems like the politicians are on the other side, and I really don't care what party they're with. I've rejoined the Republican Party after having been in it for so long, because I think that the Republican Party is got two things going for it that the Democratic Party doesn't. I think that it's going to be where the important debates happen.
It's the only side where debate is happening, it seems.
It seems, at the moment.
Yes.
I'm rooting for the Democratic Party. I'm hoping that it will engage in a useful debate in the future. They're not to the starting line yet.
No.
They're not to the starting line yet. And the other thing about the Republican Party is that it has a history of focus, whatever you might think of the last few years, it has a history of focusing on what I believe are the basic principles that must define where this debate goes. Fiscal conservatism, adherence to the Constitution, free markets. And I would add to that medical freedom that we should have been talking about 50 years ago and weren't.
Yeah.
We've learned the hard way the past few years.
Look at the situation we're in now with healthcare in this country. Oh, my goodness.
Should have been focusing on it a long time ago, and we hadn't been. And I think that the Republican Party is going to be the one that debates the extent to which we need a less militaristically interventionist foreign policy, a la where I think Donald Trump was, at least during his campaign. And I'm hopeful that's where his center of gravity still is. The jury is out.
I hope that wasn't just to get him into office.
The jury is out. We'll see how this goes. Those things, those concepts are going to be debated inside the Republican Party. And I think someday the Democratic Party will have a liberty-minded wing. It's just not going to be anytime soon.
I see. And for these reasons, the Republican Party is the right party for the right time.
I think so. I think so.
Speaking on the...
I have bet so.
Good. Good. Well, speaking on that, what is your current role with the Republican Liberty Caucus?
I recruit for the Republican Liberty Caucus.
Okay.
In the process of rejoining the Republican Party, in the Republican Party in the 90s and the 2000s, I campaigned for George Herbert Walker Bush in 92, full-time.
Wow.
We lost.
Still an incredible experience, though, I'm sure.
Incredible experience. Part-time, I campaigned for Bob Dole, and I campaigned for W for governor, which is a weird thing, and participated in other projects with the Republican Party for many, 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 many years. Participated in the Libertarian Party for something like almost 14 years. My team and I rejoined the Republican Party. I rejoined the Republican Party and joined I appreciate you having our logo here, the Republican Liberty Caucus. Joined in June with a team of 45 people.
All from the Libertarian Party.
No. Some from the Libertarian Party. Some folks were not registered at all.
Those are the best ones.
With either of the parties.
We love independence.
And a whole bunch that were already Republicans.
Okay.
Folks I knew who joined the Republican Liberty Caucus. But a bunch were from the Libertarian Party. A bunch were from my campaign. So a mix, right, of folks I knew. We joined the caucus, and a bunch of us have taken it upon ourselves to help recruit for the caucus, specifically to help start new state chapters.
Awesome.
Because most states don't have a chapter. West Virginia doesn't have a chapter, by the way.
And how can we get viable politicians on the ballot if we don't have chapters?
That's exactly right. Because at the national level, the RLC, the Republican Liberty Caucus, will take care of endorsing federal candidates for Congress, for Senate. Maybe they'll endorse a presidential campaign, I don't know. But for everything else, where the rubber really meets the road, in your state house, representatives and senators and everything that happens in your county and your school board, right? We need a state chapter in West Virginia. So I'm looking for someone who would like to help get that off the ground, and for people who would like to serve on a board, and people who just want to be members. And the caucus will be in the business of standing up for a fairly basic set of principles that are, as I mentioned earlier, tradition, the bread and butter to the Republican Party. You know, that fiscal conservatism and constitutionalism and free markets, medical freedom, less interventionist foreign policy, at least less militaristically interventionist foreign policy. So I think it's something that most folks would be comfortable with.
I think so.
I think that the vast majority of Republicans agree with these principles. And so in that sense, it's a rallying point for a lot of folks. The caucus does not get very involved with a lot of the social issues and the culture wars and things that I think are sometimes a little bit extraneous.
I agree.
To the big threats that really face us. You know, we really need to take care of these threats that face us and not get distracted, or we're going to be in a world of hurt. And I believe that if we focus on these principles, we can recruit people from outside of the Republican Party.
That's the goal.
Independents, libertarians, as well as create a home for a whole lot of Republicans who are already in the party and who are liberty-minded and would like to see the party go in a more liberty-minded direction. I think the big debate that's going to matter in American politics over the next 3 years, indeed, I would say over the next 7 years, is going to be how do we define the legacy of President Trump as he leaves office.
Interesting point you've made there. And speaking on the current state of the Republican Party, which seems to be the party of Trump, at least at the moment. What are your opinions on some of Trump's foreign policy squabbles that he has gotten himself into over the course of this year that has disturbed a lot of people on the right? One being our involvement in taking out Iran's nuclear facilities, supposedly. Mm-hmm. And then now, more recently, we have the entire coast of Venezuela surrounded by military warships.
Mm-hmm. It's complex and it's not. I think if I were to characterize, we can get into as much detail as you want, but let me first say that I would characterize the big picture as one in which the president gets horrible staff work. And I would say that about his domestic policy as well.
Okay.
The president is surrounded by incompetence. That's not to say that he doesn't share some culpability when stupid things are done. Both because in some cases he ought to know better, and in some cases because he's the one who put some of these idiots in place.
He's got a lot of yes men.
He's got a lot of
around
yes
him.
men, and that is not serving him well. It's so. Let me pick a domestic example first, because
Fair.
I think it makes the point best. It's okay for the President of the United States. It's okay for the chief executive of any big organization to set big, broad, sweeping goals. So it's okay when the president says, I campaigned on border security. We need to get control over the border. I want to dedicate whatever resources necessary, whatever we got to do, right? Everyone in the Republican Party wants control over the border. Something like 3/4 of Democrats wanted to get control over the border. Their politicians wouldn't admit it. This is what we got to do. We're a nation of laws, so if you're here illegally, you got to go. And I want whatever resources it takes to pick up the pace. There's a lot of folks that are here illegally, so we're going to have to be fairly firm and aggressive about how this is done. Because I campaigned on it, that's going to raise, my sense of urgency about this. But as I understand it, there's millions, possibly tens of millions of people who are here illegally. So chop, chop, go take care of this, right?
Yeah.
That's what you would expect from the President of the United States. It is not okay if you work for the president to then say, well, the boss wants this done as quickly as possible. We're going to have to compromise due process, and in some cases, we're going to have to forego it completely.
That's exactly what's happening.
That's not okay. What you need, I'm not suggesting this is easy. Governance is hard. Working for a president is hard. Working for a president who knows what he wants is hard. Working for a guy who has demanded personal loyalty, which I think is probably illegal, by the way.
We'll get into that once he leaves office.
Working for President Trump himself is hard. So I'm not suggesting I'm not insensitive to the difficulties. But having said that, if you're in the business of law enforcement, you need to be in the business of constitutionalism.
Agreed.
And I know whereby which I speak. One of the things that you asked me something earlier that I should have answered more fully. One of the things that you learn as a cop, one of the things that absolutely surprised me, shocked me, was the extent to which you have latitude over how any particular case goes. It is a team sport. You're not out there by yourself. You have access to your boss, at least on the phone. If it's an important case, obviously your boss is going to be there.
He'll show up.
And you have your coworkers. So you got people of whom you can ask advice. But if it's your case, you have tremendous responsibility. You're the last defense of the Constitution out there.
That's a good way to put a police officer. I like that. The last defense of the Constitution.
There is such a thing as bad police work, and there is such a thing as good police work. And the difference, not always, but one of the big differences is the extent to which a police officer remembers that his job is to protect people's rights. We tend to think of that as protecting your rights from a bad person committing a crime against you. But it also means protecting your rights against, protecting your rights from the stupid things that the government might do to you, including, in this particular case, the police officer himself.
Exactly.
Right? Because officers are all on the same team. It is a team sport, but they're all on the same team. It's very difficult, not impossible, for other officers to live up to their responsibility to say to their brother, whoa, buddy, let's talk about this. Let's handle this differently. You have to adopt an attitude of personal responsibility. I do not get the impression that everybody in the Department of Homeland Security is well equipped experientially to understand these concepts.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you.
So the way that these play out, not only is it not sufficiently reverential of the Constitution, which is critical, but you can pick up on that in the way that they communicate about it. So when a high rank, I don't want to name names because, some of these people are public servants. They're doing the best they can. They're just in a tough situation with which they're ill-equipped to handle it. When you see a high-ranking officer who's responsible for thousands of National Guardsmen say things about his interpretation of not probable cause, but reasonable suspicion, which is what it is, the level the Supreme Court has said is required to fulfill the due process requirements of the Constitution when detaining someone for a non-criminal purpose.
Correct.
When that officer says, well, we knew there were a lot of illegal aliens in that building or in that parking lot, right? As though that were a key ingredient to developing reasonable suspicion.
And it's not.
And it's not. Now, it can be what makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. I'll give you that.
Okay.
Right? If you say to me, there's a lot of bad people in that apartment building, right? And they're fixing to kill someone tomorrow. That should make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. That's not the same thing as having reasonable suspicion that the guy in 4G is someone whom you can detain.
And you can just bust down his door.
There is a difference.
Yes, I would say.
There is a difference. As a matter of fact, the Supreme Court has almost literally said there's a difference between the hair standing up on the back of your neck and having reasonable suspicion to detain someone.
Makes sense.
It can't just be a hunch.
Is that what the administration is running off of now for their immigration policies?
In effect, because you're going into parking lots where you have a hunch there's going to be someone there, right?
Yeah.
Now, if you tell me someone called and said, Bob Smith is a criminal, he's going to be in this parking lot at this time, right?
Yeah.
You know of the crime because of blah, 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 blah. Okay, now we're having a conversation.
It's a whole different situation.
Whole different situation. Okay, this is just, that's the level of detail you would not expect the President of the United States to be able, of which to avail himself.
Yeah,
You would not
really.
expect him to, he's not a criminal attorney, right? He hasn't been a cop.
No.
And you wouldn't expect, you shouldn't be asking that of him. But if you're in the business of law enforcement, you better understand this conversation,
It's a
or
necessity.
you shouldn't be in it, which is why the National Guard is ill-equipped for this.
Absolutely.
Okay, so foreign policy. It plays out over and over again every single time. It's okay for the president to say, I want to negotiate out of Ukraine. I have said that all the time.
I would think a lot of Americans would agree with that message at this point in the game.
Yeah, we don't want to be there, and yet we don't want to just walk away because we'll look like idiots.
Right.
I wouldn't have thrown $200 billion at the problem, but we did. Here we are.
So much money.
Okay, so here we are. If we walk away, we look like some combination of we don't care about $200 billion and...
Which I don't think that we do, by the way.
Which could be true. It could be true, but not the message that you necessarily want to send to either taxpayers or Europeans. But it makes it look like something that you did care about was just too hard for you, and you're a loser and you're a failure. And it makes it look like in the future, no one should take us seriously if we do decide to intervene. In other words, you have created a situation where Now you do have a stake in it, even if legitimately speaking, you didn't really before.
Yeah.
You do now.
You've created yourself one.
Yeah, it's a weird situation. You get my point. Okay.
I do.
Okay. It's okay for the president to say, I want out. Negotiate our way out. Whatever it takes. Lickety split, by the way. Lickety split, right? I campaigned on I'd be able to solve this in 24 hours. So we knew that was not going to happen.
It was
but
a horrible campaign promise.
Horrible campaign promise. The good news is it was so silly that we didn't really take it that seriously.
Nobody believed it.
But anyway, time is of the essence. Okay, that's okay. It's not okay to let the president believe that Vladimir Putin shares any of the president's objectives.
No.
Which he apparently President Trump believes that he's negotiating with Vladimir Putin.
Yes, he does.
And he's not negotiating with Vladimir Putin.
Brought him out to Alaska and everything for a photo shoot.
He's talking, right, which was lovely, by the way, and good photography. I have to hand it to our friend here, Moises, who is our photographer. Have you ever photographed anything in Alaska? No. There's got to be a gig there worth nailing, right? Yeah. Because that was the only value that came out of that meeting, was some excellent photography.
I would agree.
If you can make Trump and Putin look good through a camera, that's a skill.
That's half the battle right there.
That's a skill. Because these are not, I don't mean to be unkind, but they're not naturally gorgeous.
No.
Right?
No.
But, Alaska is, so it's an excellent photo op. The president is not negotiating with Putin. He's not. And Putin knows this. Putin's job is to outlast him.
Right. Which he probably will.
I think he probably will, right? Depending on how this goes. Now, Putin does have reasons why he might want to come to a deal. I mean, this war has been very, very expensive, about which he doesn't care very much. You just said that a lot of people don't care about the United States government wasting $200 billion. I think that the same thing could probably be said about Vladimir Putin in some cases.
Interesting.
Except that he's running out of resources.
Right.
He doesn't care about losing 100,000 lives. The problem is he's losing hundreds of thousands of, even at some point, even the Russian government has to care about the losses. I don't know that we're there yet, but at some point they'll be there.
Right.
So there are reasons why he might choose to cut a deal. But if he chooses to cut a deal, it's because he chose to cut a deal. It's not because of something that Donald Trump said.
No.
Okay.
It would be because he ran out of resources on his end.
Exactly. And so he decided, I'll take whatever goodwill might come of pretending to cut a deal. But this is exactly why Putin has said, no European security forces on the ground.
Yeah.
Yes, a promise not to join NATO. Right?
Yes.
A reduction in Ukrainian military capability. To say that he is trying to negotiate for further future invasion is obvious. It's almost childishly obvious. Because Putin doesn't need to, and he's not used to dealing with like a free press, right? Imagine if we didn't have media. If we didn't have the press, imagine the childishness of the things that we would say publicly. You wouldn't ever bother, trying to be careful about what you said.
Who cares? There's no press.
Putin, if you want to pretend like this is a negotiation, that's fine. But I'm pretty much telling you, I'm going to keep this up. If I stop at some point, it's merely to, take a breath and restart at some point in the future. Okay, right. So here's my point. It's okay to want to negotiate your way out if you're the president. But who is surrounding him who fails to instruct him of what's actually going on? I know that Marco Rubio understands this. And he has been marginalized to a certain extent until recently.
He has. Interesting. He has a bunch of jobs in the White House now.
Too many.
Yes.
At least being Secretary of State is a workload that's arguably too much for any human.
Yeah.
But to throw National Security Advisor on top of that is inhumane as well as being inhuman. It's okay for the president to say, I'm not suggesting I would say this, but it's okay for the president to say, Israel is our only democratic ally in the Middle East, and having a relationship with them in the long run, in the short run, is in our interest. This has been our history. This is where the American people want to go. This is what I was elected. I'm putting all of this into the blender. I'm mixing it up, and what I'm pouring out is we're going to be on Israel's side, and we're going to support whatever it is that they're doing because it is in some sense defensive, and it is in some sense a manifestation of their right to exist. This is not what I would say. But,
Okay.
But it's okay for the president to articulate American foreign policy. Okay? That's not how I would have played it. 100 times I have said that the American government and the Israeli government are two different governments. They deserve different foreign policies. They need to disentangle. They need to disengage. That we should not be throwing billions of dollars at the Israeli government.
I agree.
Or at other organizations around it. We have given money to not just the Israeli government, but to Hamas, Hezbollah, the Egyptian government,
Everybody gets a paycheck.
the Jordanian government. We can't even Joe Biden couldn't get a meeting with the Jordanian king after giving hundreds of billions of dollars over the years. The return on our investment in the Middle East, there are those who argue, no, it's not zero, it's negative. Like the more money you throw, the more you set up the extent to which people would rather manipulate you than listen to your principles.
That makes sense.
If that makes sense.
It does.
So I don't know whether that's true, but I think we would all agree that our investment there has not been what we would have thought in the 1940s.
No, not at all.
Put it that way. Okay. We cannot control the Israeli government. The Israeli government does not control the American government. Everyone's frustrated with everyone. These should be decoupled. Okay. Having said that, President Trump does not agree with me on that. Fine. It's okay for him to set American foreign policy. It's not okay for the nincompoops who surround him to convince him that that implies that you need to stick with the Israeli government come hell or high water.
Through thick and thin.
Through thick and thin.
Yeah.
Right? No matter what silliness comes out of Benjamin Netanyahu's mouth, and I don't mean to be completely disrespectful, but there are times when he has said things that would make your hair curl.
Yeah.
You know, it's one thing to, as Americans, we all understand this, right? You know, you get elected because you're not only pro-American, but you're, over the past 200 years, I think you could argue that we have elected people to federal office because they were the American version of Zionists.
Right.
I don't think I've ever said that out loud before, but you get where I'm going.
I do get where you're going. And
Some
I think
sense of manifest destiny.
Yeah.
Some sense of American exceptionalism, right? Some sense of we do what we want ism.
see a lot of that.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, nationalism, right? We get all that. So I'm not trying to suggest that these concepts are foreign to us or somehow these concepts come up in other countries, they don't come up here, or they only come up in Israel and the United States. They don't. They come up everywhere.
Every country.
Every country has one flavor of this or another. But that doesn't make all of it okay.
No, it doesn't.
Right? Okay, so let's talk about Russia for just a second in that same context. A lot of folks in the Libertarian Party are upset with the extent to which we threw all this money at Ukraine, and how so many horrible things were said about Russia and its invasion of Ukraine, which is worth saying, by the way.
It is.
They initiated the war unilaterally when it didn't have to be done. Didn't have to be. It's okay to say, as libertarians, we were all frustrated by that. It's okay to point out that there were a lot of factors driving Putin toward that decision.
Yes.
He did not want Ukraine to join NATO.
And that's one thing that Ukraine was getting ready to do.
Absolutely was.
From that angle, there is some
Absolutely
justification.
was. That doesn't mean, therefore, because we can understand it, we can analyze it, we understand where he's come from, that makes it okay.
Right.
The absence of the White House being able to admit that two things can be true at once is, I think, what drives a lot of people crazy.
I agree. And I think that libertarianism in the United States is only going to see growth as more people realize that both political parties are selling us out to foreign agendas. And the only party and the only movement, whether it's in the Republican Party or not, that is going to actually stand for the principles of Americanism, America here at home, is libertarian-minded individuals.
I suspect you're right. As an example of that, I think that we get jumbled up in our heads what our objectives are in dealing with China. The Chinese government is to no small extent at war with the United States. I get that. There's no reason to be naive about this. Not only do they tolerate companies that they either in small part or large part control, negotiating with American companies to grab a lot of intellectual property.
Yeah.
But the Chinese government employs people both directly and indirectly to grab intellectual property of American corporations, American universities, American individuals through espionage. And the Chinese government, the PRC government, is developing a capability to attack us in many different ways. Okay. They have also said that they want to control Taiwan, and in the last 5-year plan, and certainly in the next one, they have been very explicit about wanting to control Taiwan.
Yeah.
Okay. So we get this. That's the backdrop. So it's okay for the president to say China's an adversary. It's okay to say that in some respects, the relationship we have with them is one of an enemy. That their interests and our interests are at odds, that we are going to have to control some aspects of their expansionism. In a military sense, we're going to have to control their expansionism, and we're going to have to meet their military capabilities, and that might mean spending some money that we haven't spent before, or at the very least spending money in a little bit different way than we have before. It's okay for the president to say these broad sweeping things.
I see.
It's not okay for the fools that work for him to lead him to believe that putting tariffs on everything that China sends to the United States is going to help advance these goals.
Interesting.
Those are two different things. Another, you can be mad at your brother, but punching him in the face may help and may not. It depends on what it is you're mad at him for.
Yeah.
So now, if you're really mad at China because they export stuff to us, then a tariff is a good idea. But that's not what we should be mad at China for.
No.
We should be mad at them for the espionage, for the stealing of intellectual property, for the threat to dominate Southeast Asia, in particular, the threat to cut us off from the chips that we need that are manufactured uniquely in Taiwan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, this is what we should fear. None of that has anything to do with tariffs. So
It's a crapshoot.
Someone is allowing the president to believe that the development of economic thought ended in the 17th century, right? We made it through the 1600s, and that was it. That whoever has the most gold and sells the most crap around the world to collect as much gold as possible, that's how you win. And any understanding of modern economic theory, even a modicum of understanding of Adam Smith, right? Even if you could make it through the 18th century, you'd be ahead of where the White House is.
Right.
It's not okay for these people to lead him to believe that we don't know how this works, that our economy is better off with free trade. Yeah, the Chinese economy is better off with free trade too. That doesn't matter. I mean, that's, maybe that's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing. The Chinese government has made so many bad decisions that my greater concern than them rising up and becoming powerful is what happens when things go south.
Which they already are to a degree.
What happens when they're really up against it? This is not a group of guys. This is not a group of guys who have to stand for election.
Right.
They just have to make sure that there's not either a military coup or an inside the palace coup. They just need to make sure that they maintain power. What happens when all of the insanely moronic investments they've made to the tune of trillions of dollars, both around the world and domestically, start tanking? What happens when civil unrest becomes unmanageable because they have such a demographic problem? What happens when they can't make ends meet because the socialistic nature of their retirement system doesn't have the base of the pyramid in terms of young people to keep that afloat?
Yeah.
What happens when these things go wrong for them? Do they become more angry and militaristic? Do they seek to plunder the rest of the world, 17th century style? I worry much more about that than I worry about China becoming wealthy and powerful.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're not on a path to becoming wealthy and powerful. They're on a path to become stupid and poor and desperate. That's a problem. So, yes, we need to be controlling China to make sure they don't do anything really stupid that would be not in their interest or ours. It's in no one's interest to go to war with these people.
No way.
How do you, as fast as possible, develop the means by which to produce the AI chips, the semiconductor chips you need to develop AI? How do you develop that capability fast enough that you can eventually back off on the idea of going to war with China over Taiwan? It seems to me that's the big race. How quickly can you reverse the stupid situation we're in now, where we're so dependent on the independence of Taiwan? We should not have been telling the world, in effect, that we would stand up behind Taiwan.
No, because now we'll have to do that.
Yeah. We need to be sending the signal that if you need to invest in a place in order to manufacture chips, if you need to invest in a place that the Defense Department of the United States government is going to back you up come hell or high water,
Yeah.
maybe I can suggest West Virginia.
Well, we need all
Right?
the help we can get right here at home.
How about Milwaukee, right? There are places where we would go to war to protect.
Yeah.
Why are we sending this signal that we would go to war to protect Taiwan? Well, because at the moment we have to, but we need to unwind that as quickly as possible.
I completely agree with that, Mike.
So that's a problem.
Okay. So, as we have reiterated, politics are moving in towards a libertarian direction. New Hampshire can be seen as the first true libertarian state. Mike, a quote from you that I really appreciate is, as libertarians, we are the philosophical descendants of the founders of this nation. And so going along with that frame of thought, we can both agree that our freedoms come from God and not government. With that being said, and this might be a little bit of a curveball, how do you feel of our nation's declining religious observance? Do you believe that this shift in our nation has impacted our pursuit of liberty as a people?
A lot to unpack there.
Yes.
The short answer is yes. You mentioned the word observance. I'm gonna take the word observance out
Okay.
because for a couple of different reasons. I don't know how critical it is that we are observant, whereas I do think it's critical that we understand who we are as a people, and that has a couple of different aspects of it. I mean, who we are as an American people,
Right.
and who we are as a species, in the sense that we need to recognize that we're not all that, right?
Exactly.
The American experience is not the same as the experience of every other nation.
Not even close.
Not even close. You begin, as you and I briefly talked about, the fact that we were founded by a bunch of religious refugees.
Yeah.
And all that we've overcome during that time. The Western expansion, the frontier that the United States had, all of its evils, defined our cultural experience to no small extent. We developed a culture that was based on this idea of being independent, of being able to overcome challenges. This is a different experience than other nations have. Many nations in our hemisphere share a similar experience, but other nations do not have this same frontier concept rattling around in their minds regarding the definition of who they are as a cultural people.
It's very unique to America.
It's unique to America. Our experience as a nation of immigrants is different than most of the rest of the world. Certainly outside of our hemisphere, it's completely different.
Yeah.
It's unheard of. Not only does this make us different, but it makes us different in ways that help define our success. Think about a couple of things. Number one, what is the second most culturally tolerant nation in the world? I don't know the answer to that. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say whatever it is a distant second. I've traveled all around the world, and I can tell you, notwithstanding what most youngsters believe about this country, you step outside of these borders, you're in a very nationalistic and less tolerant place than inside the United States.
Interesting.
Think about this. what is the second best place in the world to invest? I don't know the answer to that either, but it is a distant second.
Very distant.
Very distant second. Our experience, whether it's because of the frontier, the religiosity, the fact that we were refugees, the fact that we had to overthrow the world's dominant empire, the Constitution, the 20th century experience with wars. For all of these reasons, we are by far more entrepreneurial, more creative, more willing to stand up for the individual. It's a very different experience. The American economy is different, but in ways that align with the differences about how we feel as a culture. To be an American is to buy into our frame of reference. We don't have a common ethnic culture. We certainly don't have commonality in terms of our race or religion. It's the frame of reference. It's the Constitution that stands up for the individual.
Absolutely.
That makes it so different. Well, where does that come from? That's the answer to your question, right?
Yeah.
The Constitution comes from a place of faith. I don't know whether observance in a modern day sense is what's critical.
I see.
But I do believe that it is absolutely essential that we recognize that to be American is to understand that we answer to a higher authority than our government.
Absolutely.
And that can come in a number of ways. You know, if you believe you're all that, you know, I frequently say, joking, but I do mean it, if I'm going to defer to someone to make decisions for me, you know, it's going to be Nancy. It's going to be my wife, right? The whole idea that I would defer to a government agency, the federal government of the United States or the Commonwealth of Virginia where I live or my county to make decisions for me, it seems weird.
It does.
Outside of these borders, it does not seem as weird to the rest of the world.
Wow.
It is part of the American experience that should feel strange to you.
I'm glad it does.
One of the things that I spend a lot of time talking about is the difference between coming to libertarianism from the left versus coming to libertarianism from the right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had mentioned I came up as a banker and, you know, fiscally conservative, and it was really the reason that I got frustrated with the Republican Party in the beginning was the sense that the party was all about spending too much money. George Herbert Walker Bush saying, "Read my lips, no new taxes," and then agreeing to new taxes and blah, 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 blah. The world works better. The economy is more efficient when people make decisions on their own, when businesses make their own decisions, when we're able to make our own decisions. Okay. That's what I would call coming to libertarianism from the right.
Okay.
Imagine, this is my favorite thought experiment, but please bear in mind that it's only a thought experiment.
All right, I'll bear that in mind.
Okay. Of all the weird things that a libertarian might say, let this be the weirdest. Imagine a world in which socialism works. Imagine that, you know, everyone from Friedman on up and down are all wrong.
All of a sudden, socialism is the way to go.
Socialism is the way to go. The government can make better decisions for you than you can yourself.
Mm-hmm. That's essentially what socialism is.
It's what it asserts.
Mm-hmm.
You'll be wealthier and healthier and safer, and colors will be brighter and smells will be richer and food will taste better. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, everything's going to be better. In such a world, we know that it's not true. We know this empirically. as well as by theory, and we know it in terms of chronological analysis within our nation, and we know it horizontally across other nations. 6 ways from Sunday, we know it's not true. But imagine a world in which socialism works. Would it be an ethical proposition to have the government make decisions for you?
No way.
And the answer has to be no, even if you would be better off.
And that's what it means to be an American to a certain degree.
That's what it means to be an American. And that's what I call coming to libertarianism from the left. Yeah. It's an ethical proposition. It is your right to make your own decisions, even if you make crappy ones.
Yes, it is.
In the frame of reference in which I was raised by a Lutheran and a Calvinist. I was raised in a Christian tradition. In my world, it's not just your right to make your own decisions, it's your obligation.
Yeah.
You are letting down yourself, your family, your culture, your nation, if you're ceding authority to someone else. Especially a government.
Yeah,
right?
That's such a good point.
And in the Calvinist tradition, it is a matter of seeking the path that God has created for you.
Right.
Right? In some sense, it's already created. Your job is to find it.
Yeah.
Right? Your job is to find it. And I'm perfectly willing to engage in a debate about free will, right? I mean, God does not give you free will if you're going to let someone else use it for you. You know, that seems a little strange too.
It would be,
but
yeah.
The point is that when you cede authority over your life to someone else for no good reason other than your own laziness or selfishness, you're letting down your faith.
Yeah, you really are.
That's what I call coming to libertarianism from the left, from an ethical perspective.
I really like that, Mike, because the Constitution, as you've said, is a libertarian document. Very simply, because I know this is a complex question, but how are the biggest ways that we've drifted from the Constitution? Because our Constitution can be an argument that it's already not being followed. So how do we protect and preserve this beautiful document if it's already being stomped on left and right by both sides of the aisle?
We live in a post-constitutional nation.
Oof, that hurt my heart.
Well, you said it. I said it again. So I agree with you that is true. So the real question is, how do we fight our way back?
Yeah.
How do we fight our way back? The short answer is, I don't know. The longer answer is, there are a couple of different paths. One is, again, parallel to the discussion we just had, is to demonstrate that the world would work better.
Yeah.
We need the government to stop spending so much money, for example.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the federal government is going to fail. If the federal government fails, it would bring down first bond markets and then equity markets and then currency markets and cast the entire world into a deep depression that would probably last for decades.
Not to mention completely refute against being a democratic republic.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you. That's exactly right. The other path back, not just efficiency and making the numbers work, but the other path back is to try to demonstrate that we're making decisions that compromise the value of the lives of fellow Americans about whom we care because we're not constitutionally adherent.
Yeah.
We need to recognize that the value in our fellow Americans comes from a higher authority. The reason the Constitution protects our rights is not merely because you're so great and I'm so great, as true as those things may be, but to protect the rights of everybody else.
Yeah.
One person at a time. One person at a time. I think we need to share, as part of the American experience, we need to remind ourselves, our fellow Americans, that the reason we pursue this strategy of protecting our rights is because the value in each one of our fellow Americans does not come from the Constitution. It's protected by the Constitution. And
Correct.
The value of each one of those persons is worth protecting.
Beautifully said.
It's not because if you protect this one person, it makes the world better. As true as that may be, the reason you protect the value and the rights of this one person is because that value is none of your business. It predates you, predates the Constitution. If you don't want to be a person of faith, and you don't want to believe that that comes from our Maker, that's fine. But that doesn't give you the right to say that the only value inherent in this human being is defined by the extent to which they doing the right thing, doing what I want them to do, behaving the way I say they should behave, will make the world better.
Yeah, makes no sense.
So to have that conversation with Americans is another path back, but I think it will be difficult.
And we do need a path back, Mike, because as I've heard often from you again, principle over politics. We live in a very polarized political climate. How do we balance principle over politics as a people in order to bring that change that we need to the United States?
I think you've got to remind people that the overarching objectives that we share are more important than the politics, than
Amen.
the parties. I used to do a lot of consulting with nonprofits, and one of the things that you find with nonprofits is that if they don't have an overarching objective, their minds tend to wander. With a for-profit company, it's a little bit easier in the sense that you know you're there to make money. Right? You're selling widgets, and we're making money, and everyone understands that the value of your job is that you plug into a system that's designed to improve the bottom line.
Right.
And if you can't trace how your job is making money for the company, you're doing something wrong. Okay. For a for-profit company, it's relatively simple. For a nonprofit, if there's not a binding, thematic, overarching, single objective that everyone buys into, minds wander.
Yeah.
And I think that that's where our politics is. If you were to ask, I don't have data to back this up, but here's my guess. If you were to ask the staff of any particular congressman or senator on the Hill, what's your overarching objective? Not, I understand you answer the phone, you write, you take notes, you lobby other congressmen, you deal with the media. Okay. Why do you do this? Right? What's the big picture? What's the top objective that everyone in your office is buying into? Right? What do you have in common with the worker next to you? I'm guessing, I don't know if they would say it out loud, but I'm pretty sure they would say to get our congressman reelected.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all a big business.
Right?
Yeah, I completely agree.
That's the widgets we're selling.
And that's what's getting Americans fed up with the political process.
Absolutely.
Making Americans want to walk away from it completely.
Right.
Or just give up and give in to ideas of Marxism.
So if you've got congressional staff and congressmen who think it's their job to get reelected, you can see why. And if you're living in a media bubble,
Yep. Which
right?
a lot of people do. Most people do.
Which most people do.
unfortunately.
Then you can say any hideous thing you want about someone in a different party, and increasingly often, even someone in your own party who's not in your caucus.
Yeah.
Right? You can say whatever horrible thing that you want to say. This comes from an absence of an overarching goal. It's why everyone gets along when we're at war.
Exactly.
Right? All of a sudden, the rest of it all seems less important. We all understand that we have one big goal: defeat the enemy, survive, right?
Keep the homeland safe.
Everything else gets subsumed.
Yeah.
We don't have that now. And I blame our politicians. To reference an earlier conversation that you and I had off camera, politicians are not typically leaders.
No.
Right? They're not leaders. They're not pointing out what our objective should be and leading the way there. They're basically just feeding whatever crap they think that you want to hear so that they can get
It's very unfortunate.
reelected. So I think that this is a big problem for policy and principle versus politics.
I see. And so most Americans on the left and the right, and I would argue that most Americans are finding themselves in the middle nowadays, would love to see the temperature being brought down.
Yeah.
Could libertarianism be the key to bringing the temperature down when Trump leaves office?
Yes. Or at least I should say I'm banking on it.
Yeah.
And that's to say, maybe without the word libertarianism, maybe even without the word liberty, but certainly a recognition that we need to get back to fiscal conservatism and free markets, and an understanding of what the Constitution requires in terms of hemming in the power of the government.
Absolutely. And so we have respectful dialogue is not found anywhere in politics nowadays. And it's an argument that it's been that way for the better part of the last decade. What role does respectful dialogue play in the future of the GOP, since that is the party we are working in? How do we bring back respectful dialogue?
I think that the only way you bring it back is to get folks to focus on an objective that they think is more important than trashing their opponent. I don't know if that's going to happen anytime soon. And I don't think it's chicken and egg, by the way.
Okay.
You know, I used to think that it would only happen after you tone down the dialogue, that you could talk about what our principles need to be, and, you know, that feeds into themselves. I don't think that's the case anymore. I really believe that we need to understand that we are facing existential threats, and that when people see those, feel those,
Right.
there'll be a realization that we're on the same team. And by same team, I still mean, you know, the 330 million of us on one team and a whole bunch of stupid politicians on the other team.
Dividing us.
There's going
Absolutely.
to have to be some turnover. A lot of politicians are going to have to leave Washington and be replaced, I'm afraid.
Interesting. So as an Austrian economist, what is your take on Trump trying to use his tariff agenda, which I already know you don't care for, to eliminate the IRS and the income tax? Because that is like combining libertarian ideals with tariffs in the same thought.
Well, okay. Let's define terms.
Okay.
Tariffs are taxes.
They are.
Okay. Yes. In the school of libertarian thought, we have an expression that taxes are theft. Taxation is theft. Now,
It is.
The reason we say taxation is theft is that taxation is theft. Okay? That's the reason we say this.
Well put, Mike.
Yeah, that's the reason we say this. Whether it comes from tariffs or comes from an income tax, it's still theft. The issue that we're dealing with is how much of this theft we're going to put up with, meaning how much are we going to allow the federal government to spend of our money?
Yeah.
And that's a debate that we need to have because we're running out of money and the federal government is not going to be able to make ends meet at some point. I would go so far as to say we need to update that expression and recognize that all government spending is theft because every time the government spends $1, it's $1 that you can't spend.
Wow, well put.
It will come from you either in current taxation or future taxation or inflation, which is sort of another form of taxation.
Yeah, we saw that after the COVID-19 response.
And well said. So that's the real issue. Now, there are better ways and worse ways to raise money. There is a way to evaluate whether a tax is, I don't want to say a good tax or a bad tax, but whether a tax is more or less disruptive. What you want for any given amount of money that you want to raise, right? Say you're in agreement, you need to raise $1 trillion, which is a sad thing, but let's move on from the budgeting and resource issues.
Right.
If the government needs to raise $1 trillion and you had a choice between A or B, A is a very high tax rate on a small base.
Okay.
Right? 10% of $10 trillion get you $1 trillion, right?
Right.
Or B, a lower tax rate on a bigger base. 1% of $100 trillion, to make up an example. B is better because it's less disruptive. It causes less change in how people make their decisions.
Okay.
There is less unfairness if presumably everyone is being taxed. Less disruption because there's less incentive to get out from underneath it, right?
Yeah.
And remember when disruption is caused because of someone's decision being changed, it has a ripple effect. If you're a business and you stop marketing a particular product because someone is taxing it, that has implications for your business, for your customers, for your supply chain, for your employees. It goes on and on and on and on.
Right.
So you want as big a base as possible. Well, the biggest base you can possibly have is our entire economy, meaning all of our income. That's why an income tax is less disruptive for any given amount of money than a tax on a smaller base.
I see.
Like imports. Taxing imports is extremely disruptive because the tax rates are very high. The reason you put a tariff on is to shut something down.
Not to build it up.
And it's not to raise money.
Right.
Right? If the reason you're running a tariff is to raise money, you're doing it wrong. Just raise the income tax, right? Which is horrific, but at least it's less disruptive than trying to raise money through a tariff.
Okay.
The reason you do tariffs is to protect an industry from competition, presumably because there is some strategic issue, right? You're afraid you're going to go to war and you have to be able to manufacture whatever it is you're talking about at home. Or it's just political, right? I have a group of farmers and I need to protect them, otherwise they won't vote for me, which is horrific,
Very.
But that's what happens. But if you're doing it because you want to raise money, you're just bad at math.
So I'm assuming the administration is a little bit bad at math.
Very bad at math.
Coming from an economist.
Very bad at math.
And just to make a point there, we started our nation having a revolution off of a 3% T-tax. We now currently spend a good 30% of our income total on taxes. with no
Which is
revolution.
insane.
It is.
That's a lot of stuff we should be throwing in the river,
I completely
in the
agree.
harbor.
And these issues, I think, as Gen Z specifically, which I'm a part of, I'm at the latter end of Gen Z, but I am in Gen Z. These are the issues that are affecting Gen Z. We are tired of the lack of affordability, and that is coming from poorly ran financial decisions coming out of the federal government, not to
Right.
mention how we see it also in some state governments.
Yep.
You've said, very funny, that poverty is a political phenomena.
Yes.
Well, Mike, Gen Z can't afford homes. They can't afford to get married or to have families. Mike, Gen Z, some of us can't even afford McDonald's without taking out debt, without going into debt.
Right.
That's a political phenomena.
Yes, it is.
How do we curb that and potentially give Gen Z a way ahead in the future? Is a 50-year mortgage the solution?
No, 50-year mortgage is silly. It doesn't even deserve time in your podcast. Look, if it were a good idea, people would be doing it already, and they're not. So,
Because the president's throwing it around like it's the best thing since sliced bread.
and that's fine. That's fine, but it's a silly idea. Look, there's two big drivers of our affordability challenge at the moment. One is inflation. We understand this, right?
Yes.
We had huge amounts of inflation coming off of the pandemic in the Biden administration. So much money was spent by the government to keep things afloat because the government was shutting down our economy.
Right.
Just a series of horrific decisions. That inflation is still being felt. The inflation rate has come down, but prices don't come down, right? Just
No, they
the
stay
rate
up.
at which they're increasing has slowed, but that huge jump in prices is still being felt. On top of that, we still have inflation at a fairly robust pace now, on the order of 3% a year. Prices continue to go up.
Right.
Okay. This means that not only do you get a lot of sticker shock, just looking at prices sets you back on your heels,
It does.
right?
Does
It's
that
just-
for me.
Yeah, it's just really something. But it's not just psychology. It's real in the sense that inflation has outpaced wage growth. And that's if you're a wage earner.
Right. Wages are not increasing, but we get 3% increase every year on goods.
That's exactly right. And if you're not a wage earner, if you're living off of a pension, then typically you're really screwed also. And in many cases, even more screwed.
Right.
So it's not just a matter of psychology. It's real. We haven't been able to keep up the last few years on top of all of the sticker shock issues that came with the huge inflation during the Biden administration.
Yeah.
Then the other thing that we have going on is that housing in particular
Yes.
has become very, very expensive. And there's sticker shock there, but there's also, beyond just psychology, very real things happening that are driving up the cost of housing. Big things. Because there was so much inflation, the Federal Reserve had to jack interest rates to try to get inflation under control. And long-term interest rates were up because inflation was anticipated in the future. So interest rates had to increase to accommodate for that. Well, the higher interest rates have made it very difficult for people to be able to afford a new home.
It has.
And it has made rents more expensive, right? Because the rate of return on the investment has to be higher to pay for the debt required to acquire these properties.
Yeah, it has to match it.
The rent has gone up much, much faster than wages. The ability to afford a home, the cost of owning a home has gone up much, much faster. Then you've got a couple of other issues that people don't spend as much time talking about.
Okay.
One is that we have bad zoning in the United States.
Interesting.
The reason San Francisco costs so much is because there is so much land set aside for single-family homes, and you're not allowed to build multifamily.
I see.
It's just a, as we say, NIMBY, not in my backyard phenomenon. The NIMBY movement continues to get stronger and stronger and stronger.
It does.
So that's a real challenge, because it is in the metropolitan areas where this phenomenon is being observed. Yes, land in rural counties is more expensive than it used to be, but where this is really a problem is places like San Francisco and Los Angeles and Chicago and New York, which is why we now have Zoran Mamdani, the new mayor of New York City, because he was able to put his finger right on what it is that everyone's upset about, which is the cost of housing in New York is out of control, and no one else was saying enough about it, and so people were willing to vote for him, not because he has a solution, but at least because he was talking about it.
Yeah.
That's how low we set the bar for
we've
politics
set it
in the
very
United
low.
States, is at least we got a guy who's talking about it and people voted for him, right?
Yeah, that's really sad.
Yeah, so you've got that, and you've got some demand issues too. Housing has become more expensive because people are consuming more of it per person than ever before in the United States.
That's right. We live very well here in the United States.
We live very well, and we're doing less of 5 people in a house than we used to, so we've driven up the price in that sense. And on top of all that, I don't know how much detail you want in the housing market, but on top of all that, the construction of housing cannot keep up.
No.
A lot of the construction industry went out of business during the pandemic and hasn't come back. One of the things that you learn the hard way, that the difference between being a business major and being an economist, right? The business major quickly figures, quicker than an economist, that when a business goes under because of bad public policy, you can't just flip a switch, reverse the policy, and all of a sudden the business is back.
Unfortunately.
That's just not how it works.
Right.
And this is an industry that has not come back. It was put under by bad public policy, and it is it's very specific and intensive in terms of its use of capital, which means that to bring this industry back, people have to be comfortable making long-term bets with hundreds of millions of dollars.
Which at the time it does not seem is here.
So for this reason, and all of these reasons, the pricing of land and the pricing of construction and the pricing of residential properties, especially in urban areas, especially in those select urban areas where people are moving, has skyrocketed.
And we're starting to see that here in the eastern panhandle of West Virginia. We are the only real part of the state that has seen a population increase, interesting enough. But to get back to the point on Mamdani, how do we stop the rise of politicians like Mamdani and win the narrative on the issues that are affecting Gen Z?
I think that we have to point to solutions. In other words, it's not enough for an economist like me to sit here and say, well, I can explain to you why housing is so expensive.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike. But the explanation doesn't do me a whole lot of good at the grocery store. So we need to be able to say there are very specific things that we can do about it. Number one, we have to get inflation under control.
We do.
Number two, we need to stop the government from continuing to take your money. When the government takes your money, you can't spend it.
That's right.
Well,
pretty simple equation.
It's a simple equation. I don't know how to make this any simpler. You don't have enough money to buy all the things that you want to buy because the government keeps taking more and more and more and too much of it.
Yeah.
And doing with it dumber and dumber and dumber things.
So the solution can't be giving the government even more control.
Thank you. As a matter of fact, it's 180 degrees wrong. I do not hope that the people of New York are overly burdened with a catastrophe that comes from the new mayor.
Yeah.
But I do hope that there are ways that we can learn that he does not have a solution that makes sense.
Very well said. Now, shifting over to college issues, Mike, 63% of Americans now just say that a 4-year degree isn't worth the cost. Do you think that making college cheaper would fix that perception amongst Americans, or is the whole you need a degree to get a good job thing kind of run its course with Gen Z?
You mean already run its course?
Yeah.
We will see. I'm not sure. We will see. It's my sense that it's run its course.
Interesting.
But that implies for it to stick, for it to be successful in transitioning away from the need for the degree, for it to really make sense in the long run, as opposed to just a fad of all of us just complaining. You know, I'm in the 63%, right?
Right.
For it to stick, something has to replace it. And that is a challenge. Now, you brought up the idea of it being cheaper. That's, in effect, one of the ways to replace very expensive universities is with cheaper universities.
Yes.
One of the reasons a couple basic reasons why universities are so expensive. One is that they've done a crappy job of using technology over the decades. Not only have they done a crappy job, but it's hard. You know, the basic model for teaching is some guy or gal in a classroom with a chalkboard, right?
Yeah.
That hasn't changed much the past several hundred years.
Kind of crazy.
And it's very hard to economize on that. For that reason, it's become proportionately more expensive. Relative to the rest of the world, it becomes more and more expensive because you're not deploying technology in the same way you do in other industries that drive down the costs in other industries. You get the idea.
I do.
So, can we utilize technology in a way, either through colleges or independently of colleges, to convey that education?
I see.
Okay. The other reason that colleges and universities are so expensive is because we throw a lot of public money at them. And whenever, we've learned this in healthcare, whenever the people paying the bill are not the people who are making the decisions, costs run up without control. So that's a problem. The other issue with colleges is that it's not just education you're buying. It's the certification.
Yeah.
It's the certification. It's the seal of approval, right? The university, the college has said, well, you know, Mike's not all that smart, but he did enough to get himself through 4 years of school. Mm-hmm. So you can at least, as a bare minimum, trust that he can do the things that you need to do to get yourself through school. Okay. So what we need is a way to work our way through that challenge. We need another certification authority if it's not going to be colleges.
I see. I agree with that completely.
I don't know what that is likely to look like, whether it's a testing regime or experiential certification or just cheaper colleges, whether it's businesses in the private sector, businesses that already exist and are not in the business of education, but could be tangentially to what they do, apprentice programs and things like that may play a larger role in the future. It's one of those things that unions used to do better than they do now.
That's right. That's a good point.
Whether they play a role in the future, I'm not optimistic, but that model in some sense has to be pursued.
I see. Now, to wrap up here today, we are in West Virginia, and I want to ask some specific questions that are affecting us right here at home. One being that West Virginia is no secret to being the epicenter of the drug war and the opioid crisis. Mm-hmm. it has been ground zero for years.
Yep.
Mike, if you had 5 years, it's a decent amount of time, if you had a 5-year window to change drug policy
Yep.
in the state of West Virginia,
Yeah.
what would you do first, and how quickly do you think you would see the results?
That's a great question. The way you put it is terrific. We absolutely need to finish the decriminalization of marijuana because it's silly. But that's not what you're talking about. That's not the big problem. What we need to do is find a way to treat drug problems, addiction,
Yeah.
like the problems that they are. At their heart, they're medical problems. They're not criminal problems at their heart. It's not the same as punching someone in the face, right?
No, and you would know you were a police officer.
Yes, and by that, I know what you mean is I know what things look like when they're basically criminal. You did not
Correct.
mean that I would punch someone in the face.
Absolutely
Okay.
not. Let's
So,
make that clear.
I understand what you mean by that. When you treat a problem with the wrong solution, you're not going to get the outcome that you want. That's just, I'm going to assert that for another time to tease out.
Okay.
We need to treat drugs for what they are. We learned during the prohibition of alcohol, right, 100 years ago, that it didn't make the world a better place.
No, it didn't even work.
It didn't even work. I suppose it cut back on the consumption of alcohol a little bit, but the violence that came with it was out of control, right?
Absolutely.
And there are those who argue that it didn't even cut back consumption all that much. Okay. The idea that what we're doing now is succeeding is so stupid that the frustration in someone who worked as a police officer is almost more than I can bear.
Wow.
Having done CPR on plenty of young men overdosing,
Oh, my goodness.
I can tell you that what we're doing now doesn't work.
Yeah.
So, don't come to me with, we need to do more of what we're doing.
Right. It's not
Right.
working.
That's not a thing because we're doing all that we can, and it is expensive in every way that a program can be expensive.
Yeah.
And one of the big ones is it keeps people from getting treatment. As a matter of fact, I would argue that's the biggest problem. Well, two big problems. One is it keeps people from getting treatment. The criminalization of possession means, people don't want to hold up their hand and say, I've got a problem. The other problem is that the criminalization, the blanket, stark, black-white criminalization of sales means that everything is done in an unregulated market.
Yeah.
Everything is done in a black market. Well, the problem with fentanyl, to pick the most stark example, is that it is so powerful. It is manufactured by such ruthless and poorly educated people that you spin the wheel every time you use it.
That's insane.
It's insane.
Crazy way to live.
And we see this when you have an in the town in which I worked, if you had a fentanyl overdose, you go out there, CPR, fire department, kids in the ambulance, Narcan, you do what you can. Lives, he dies, I don't know. Off he goes. 3, 2, 1, next call.
Oh, my goodness.
Okay, now, the reason they come in batches is because of the batches of fentanyl. In other words, you could go weeks in my zone, right, where I was responsible,
Right.
without a fentanyl overdose. But if you had one, another one's coming tonight. I might
Just
have
know.
3 tonight. It's because there's a bad batch of fentanyl in town.
I see.
It's either too strong or it was cut with something else that's poisonous, right? Or they don't even know that there's fentanyl in it.
Right. It's something completely different.
They thought they were getting something different, but there's fentanyl in it because fentanyl is powerful. On a dollar for dollar basis, sometimes people use it to boost other things. Okay, you get the idea.
Yes.
This means that fundamentally, the problem is one of a black market, an unregulated, illegitimate market. Now, we know that black markets kill in all kinds of manifestations.
Absolutely.
Right? But in drugs, it kills ruthlessly. We need a way to regulate this. Yes, we need to discourage young people, everybody, from using something like fentanyl. There's no question about it.
Right.
I mean, I grew up in a family that discouraged you from using alcohol. So, I don't mean to sound like this is either easy or I'm the one who should be judgmental. I know that this can go sideways and this can be handled badly. But if you've got a black market who's killing dozens of thousands of people every year, as we do in this nation alone, don't tell me that continuing to create a black market is simultaneously the solution. It can't be simultaneously the problem and the solution.
The same exact time.
It can't be. So for this reason, the answer to your question is, I wouldn't with fentanyl, but I would with something else. I would pick out something that's less addictive and less dangerous. Something on the schedule, not marijuana. Right? Step up from marijuana, but I wouldn't go all the way to fentanyl. Pick out some intermediate drug. Decriminalize, regulate it to death.
Because now you can.
Because now you can.
Right.
And see how that goes.
Okay.
We can only solve this problem societally. This is not something that, one business is going to solve. And you can only get society on board experientially. It's only by seeing it work, right?
Yeah.
That is going to get people on board.
That's true.
And that has to be done carefully, one step at a time. Regulated, a single drug, a single state.
Yep.
And then we learn how it works. It's the only way to do it. I wouldn't, plenty of libertarians and plenty of anarchists would say completely decriminalize, completely deregulate, anything goes on Monday. It wouldn't work.
And I think we see that from was it Oregon that did
in
that?
Portland?
Yeah.
Portland's a mess for a variety of they did everything wrong they could think of doing it wrong.
Yeah.
They're not regulating it the way that it needs to be regulated, and they're precluding certain people from getting into the business who would do a better job of it.
Right.
They've completely screwed it up.
Now to ask again on West Virginia, final question here on West Virginia. West Virginia has the oldest median age in the country, and we keep losing a ton of our young talent to neighboring states. You have said that libertarian ideas really click well with young voters. So what is one policy pitch that you would make to a 22-year-old living in Morgantown or in Shepherdstown, West Virginia, to convince them that there is a future right here at home for them?
Pursue the most flexible education possible and become as American about it as possible. And by that, I mean, when I think of what it means to be American in an economic sense, lean into your willingness to take some risks.
I like that.
Your entrepreneurial spirit, right?
Yeah.
Your willingness to take ownership, literally, but even metaphorically, of your own path. And at the same time, recognize what it is that makes your American community special. Lean into what makes your community more special than your government. In other words, take care of your family. Lean into your own personal responsibility. Be all that you can be for yourself.
Yeah.
Make yourself as worthy of a person as possible for a long-term partner, for a marriage partner. Lean into what it is that's going to help your end game. When you're my age and you're looking back, what is it that you wish that you had accomplished? Because if that's, I left West Virginia when I was 27 and I went to Los Angeles for a job, I don't know if I can help you.
Right.
If you tell me, I met a girl and I went to Los Angeles to start a family because, her family was there or for whatever reason, right? Okay, we're having a conversation. But what I would advise is it's not a matter of geography, right? It's a matter of figuring out what's important to you and finding it, not in a geographic sense and not even in a chronological sense, but finding it inside of yourself and recognizing that that's what matters more than anything else. And how you define success will follow that. You will never be unsuccessful if you have a good grip on what it is that your priorities are.
Very well said. This has been an awesome conversation with you, Mike. And I do want to say to all the keyboard warriors out there, and God bless you for your efforts. It is one thing to type your opinions online. It is a completely separate thing to go outside, touch some grass, and actually work towards advocating for the changes that you want to see in your community. So I would encourage everybody who is watching Politically Motivated to go out, get involved, go to your local city council, join your local Republican Liberty Caucus. Maybe we'll be getting one here in West Virginia soon. And be a part of what it means to be an American, which is giving back to a country that has given so much for us. We need to make sure that we preserve that. Mike, thank you for being on our program.
Great joy to be with you. I'm
Where
really
can
grateful.
people find you?
Well, they should email me.
Okay.
You can email me at mike@miketremont.com. And you can go to miketremont.com and poke around. You can connect to information about the Republican Liberty Caucus. I would love to hear from someone out there who would like to help start a chapter in West Virginia. You would have enormous latitude and a lot of fun, and that's half the game.
Well, I think you might be talking to that person, so let's get off camera now. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time on Politically Motivated, and have a very Merry Christmas.